So welcome, dear friends, to the Sutta study group. And we're going to start as usual. Welcome, Venerable. Good to see you. We're going to start as usual with a meditation session for 10-15 minutes or so. So let's relax and enjoy sitting together for a little while before we dive into the suttas. So, dear friends, when ready, feel free to open the eyes and come into this space of Sutta study. Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for being here. And this is going out on live stream, so you're very welcome to do what you're mostly doing and not have your videos on. Okay, we're today going to do suttas from the Vedana Samyutta, the 36th chapter of Samyutta Nikaya. Vedana, all about feelings. And I had a look at this chapter during the week and again today, and I honestly can't pick out any suttas because they're all so good. So I suggest that we start from the beginning and we'll see how far we get. There are a lot of quite short suttas, and it's like many variations on a theme, just as in the Satipatthana Samyutta. So I think we're going to enjoy very much, probably the next week or 2 or 3, going through these suttas in Vedana Samyutta. So let's start with number 1. Here we go. This is called Samadhi Sutta, immersion. And here's Bhante Sujato's translation from Sutta Central. I'll read probably the whole sutta and then we can have a discussion around it. There are these 3 feelings. What 3? Pleasant, painful, and neutral feeling. Sukha Vedana, Dukkha Vedana, Adukkama Sukha Vedana. These are the 3 feelings. And now we have a verse from the Buddha. Samahito sampajano, stilled, aware. Sato Buddhasa Sawako, a mindful disciple of the Buddha. Vedana chapajanati, understands feelings. Vedananam chasambhavang, and understands the cause of feelings. Yata chata nirujanti, where they cease. Magancha kayagaminang, and the path that leads to their ending. Vedananam kaya bhikkhu, with the ending of feelings. Nichato parinibbutoti, one is hungerless, one is extinguished. This word nichato, it means going out, something going out, or something emanating forth. And parinibbuto, cooled down, extinguished. Come to peaceful rest. So how beautiful. I'm going to read the verse again, just in English. Stilled, aware, a mindful disciple of the Buddha understands feelings, the cause of feelings, where they cease, and the path that leads to their ending. With the ending of feelings, one is hungerless, one is extinguished, at peace. How beautiful. And right here in this short verse, isn't it, we have the Eightfold Path, we have the Four Noble Truths, the understanding of feelings, First Noble Truth, understanding suffering, the cause, where they cease, and the path that leads to their ending. So there's the Four Noble Truths right there in relation to Vedana. And stilled, aware, what is that? That is our meditation. When we're ready to develop samadhi, samahito, the mind that's composed, collected. When we come to meditation, we allow the collectedness of mind that enables sampajano, the clear comprehension, the awareness. And then this is the way, this is how we can come to understand feelings, to practice with feelings. And as the Buddha is saying here, this practice with feelings, noticing also the arising and the passing, this leads us slowly but surely, inexorably, to the end of all suffering, to Nibbana. So there we go. This is a magnificent first teaching in this sutta, in this Samyutta chapter. These first few are in verse form, which is rather nice. We can enjoy some kind of Pali poetry and succinct teachings in verse form. So I'll have a pause here and just see if anybody would like to comment. It's incredible teaching to me. It so covers everything. It really does. It's all here. And with the lens of feeling, with this paradigm, with this attitude of focusing on Vedana. It reminds me of my teacher Goenkaji, because this is his teaching, essentially. Just watch the feelings arising and passing. It's enough. How wonderful. Yeah, Linda.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Just an explanation maybe of what they mean by neutral feelings. I know they have the other two are more like in the either negative or positive feelings. And neutral means you don't really care either way. You don't have an opinion on whatever it happens to be. Is that what they mean, or is they have another definition for neutral feelings?
Yeah, thank you, Linda. In the Pali, it's actually the three kinds of feelings: dukkha vedana, sukha vedana, and adukkama sukha vedana. So it's literally neither painful nor pleasant. So it's feelings that you can't say are one or the other. It's not really about attitudes or opinions. It's about what is actually felt. So the Buddha's taking us to this essential place of awareness of what's actually happening. And so this is the feelings that we can be aware of in the body. And we can say mostly, most of them, Linda, are neutral. Most feelings are neutral. They don't have a strong flavor of pleasure or pain, which one could say means they don't lend themselves to us bringing in aversion or desire, and that kind of escalating into craving and all the kinds of negativity. Neutral feelings are more, they're kind of there, but there's not a strong push or pull around them. The interesting thing with meditation is that most of the time we're observing neutral feelings, most of the time. And the interesting thing there is that they're not interesting, in fact. The interesting thing is that they're quite boring. And so we have to cultivate then a broader awareness and cultivate curiosity, cultivate Dharma investigation, so get interested in them, even if they don't seem interesting, because actually this is most of our experience. And it's really good to, not miss it, not sideline, not bypass most of what's happening for us, just because it's subtle and because we don't have a strong reaction. So this is really valuable to consider and not to miss that there are three kinds of feelings, not just two.
I was just wondering if it was, I know, like with neutral, to sort of, neutral feelings or something you want to go towards, because I know there was a Tibetan Buddhist teacher that told me a long time ago that not the highs and the lows, like the extreme happiness and the extreme sadness, depression, but you want to keep on sort of a balanced, even keel and more neutral. But I thought, well, that's okay for the extreme, sadness and anger and that kind of thing. But when you're looking at happiness. It's like, well, I don't know if I really want to dampen that down. But it's like, I guess the idea is to stay balanced with your feelings and not be too one way or to the other way, like not too happy or too negative, not too sad and angry and things like that. So I wonder if it was like that, or I don't know. It might be a different interpretation. No idea.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. I'll just respond to Linda and then Anagarika Patibada and then Corinna. Linda, the Buddha's really clear that, we tend to have a kind of reaction to all the different kinds of feelings. And so the encouragement is to stay steady and simply observe, simply feel what we feel and allow that to be our experience. It's enough, actually, because there's always something happening. And so any kind of reactivity at all. And of course, as you say, with pleasant, we tend to want more. With unpleasant, we will move away from. And with neutral feelings, we might want more. We might prefer them to other kinds of feelings. We might actually be seeking peace and that kind of subtlety of neutral feelings. Absolutely. Or we may shy away from them at times, or we may have no great response either way and just need to develop the ability to stay steady when there's really not very much happening at all. And that's so valuable. So I think we're going to hear more, Linda, as we go through these suttas about neutral feelings and how to relate to them. And I'm sure you'll be very interested when this comes up.
Thank you.
Yay. Anagarika Patibada?
I think that in my observation of neutral feelings.
Can you hear her? Can you come a bit closer? Would you mind? She's just going to come a little bit closer to the mic. Thank you.
Neutral feelings for me when I practice leads to boredom, leads to sloth and torpor. It moves in that direction. But I think if you can help us understand the distinction between neutral feeling and equanimity, that would be quite helpful.
So I'll do. Thanks very much. So did you all hear the question there? Yeah, so that's really interesting. What can we make of this? How do we distinguish between neutral feelings and equanimity? And that's really interesting. I would say that neutral feelings are just neutral feelings. They're they are the feelings in the body that are neither pleasant nor painful. Equanimity is a quality of the mind, of the chitta. It's a different kind of area of experience. And I would say that equanimity is easier to notice in relation to neutral feelings than in relation to pleasant or painful feelings. And so maybe in our observing of the neutral feelings, we may be to some extent growing equanimity or experiencing equanimity. What's interesting is that we can then lose that equanimity when the feelings change. And we can see the difference. We can notice that. And overall, I'd say that the meditation itself, and in this respect, observing feelings, one way of meditating, that it naturally leads to greater equanimity because we're slowly but surely learning not to follow the reactivity and just to let go, of any kind of proliferation around what we're experiencing. And that develops equanimity for us very naturally. So I hope that kind of makes that distinction for you. Is there anything you want to come back with?
Well, I think I need to think about it. When you said it's a different quality, it's of the chitta, it's of the mind, versus one of the body, and the neutral feeling in the physical form.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really like that. So we're just talking a little bit about, the distinctions, and we can talk more about this. It's a very interesting topic. Thank you. Corinna.
Yes, thankfully it's a pretty, maybe a similar question. When they're talking about the hungerless and the distinguishing of feelings, I thought feeling was more of like a biological sense. I didn't think it was something that goes away. I thought it was more like the reaction that goes away. If you could clarify that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, let's go back to the sutta for this. And thank you for this, Corinna, because I think it's a really important point. If we come back to, here we go, the end of the verse, the second part. So one understands feelings through observing them, through meditation practice, through stillness, samadhi, sampajanya. And one sees them arising, one sees where they cease, and one sees the path that leads to their ending. With the ending of feelings, one is hungerless, extinguished. Yes, what it's really pointing to is just as you say, Corinna, I feel it's not saying that we necessarily stop feeling altogether when we let go of the suffering associated with feelings. It's the suffering that's able to depart. And nibbana, there are different ways in which one can experience nibbana, the final nibbana, parinibbana. When the body dies, that's the complete and utter end. But one can experience nibbana and still have a body that's alive. And I'll just stop screen sharing. And so to let go of the suffering associated with feelings and with let go of the reactivity is really what it's pointing to here, because one can be free from all suffering and still have a body that feels, to still be alive. If we're alive, we have a body that feels. So the feelings don't necessarily cease. They cease at the end of life, physical life. So I think it's really subtle, isn't it? It's talking about this relationship to suffering. And when we suffer around feelings, it's because we're identifying with them, because we're reacting to them, because we're making more of them than what they are. If we stop doing that, pleasant, painful, neutral feelings will continue to manifest, but we don't have to suffer around them. Thank you, Corinna.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Marian.
Hi, I'm new
Hi.
here. It's so interesting how this is really getting to me, because I've struggled with a lot of anxiety and a lot of feelings. And I wanted to ask, because people already brought it up, what are the practices to let go of those feelings that scare you or that are, like haunting you per se?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Marian, for this question, because I'm sure it's relevant for every single one of us. How do we let go of the anxiety and the agitation around what's happening? Here, the Buddha's really pointing the way right in this sutta, actually, when he says in the first line of these verses, samahito, sampajanyo, to be willing to become still, not to the extent where we're not reacting, not to the extent when we're not anxious. What I mean is just to sit still, just to be still, and to pay attention with clear understanding of what we're doing. So meditation, in short, Marian, to sit, to meditate, and to observe. So one thing that can really help with this is to notice the breath, because it's happening all the time and it's a rhythmic process. So it kind of helps us to, keep attentive, holds the attention, or to focus on the body, or both. And in this way, we come to present moment experience. And, you start to recognize that, okay, whatever's happening in this present moment, anxiety and agitation will stem from that. You know what I mean, Marian? It's like they come from that. So if I'm feeling anxious and I take up this teaching, I just put myself in a quiet place. I go still and I close my eyes and I just pay attention. What's actually happening? Boom, 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 boom. My heart's beating and I'm tense. Maybe I'm grinding my teeth, and maybe I've got fluttering in my tummy, all different things. I could call that anxiety, or I could just notice what's actually happening, all these different things. And I can just open up my attention and really feel what's going on. And I then this sense of anxiety sort of fades away. And what's really happening is I'm just getting really interested in this body and what's happening in this body. And in this way, we're coming into really just simply paying attention to what's present. And this is a way in which one can notice that anxiety, agitation, distress of any kind will tend to find its peace, like slowly, you know. We can notice these things start to sort of settle. So I think this sutta is really answering your question, honestly. And let me know if that makes sense to you, Marion.
Yes, it did. Just recently I was in group therapy and I think I had like an anxiety attack and my blood pressure spiked. So what I did is I asked for ice and I just sat on the floor and just started breathing. And my blood pressure about 30 minutes later went a lot down. So it's true, when you're just stay still, you breathe and you kind of just like try not to freak out. It does help with even some medical conditions like my high blood pressure due to anxiety. So that really resonated with me. Thank you.
You're so welcome, Marion. And that's just so brilliant what you did to cool down, literally, isn't it? Like with the ice as well.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You kind of probably knew this will help me to cool down even more quickly. But like exactly this. And I would say that if we take the time, you know, to every day to stop and just pay attention, what's happening in the body, how is it? Then things like high blood pressure and certainly anxiety, any kind of agitation, we'll notice over time, you know, that there can be a kind of alleviation happening, a soothing of all of that. And it's really beautiful. And as you are telling us, you know, when it comes to the crunch, when we're really getting stressed, this is the most important time to remember and bring in this mindfulness, bring in the stillness, just allow ourselves to stop everything else, you know, and just pay attention to this body. And it will, you know, this process of calming will happen very naturally then. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful. Dinwi, hello.
Hello, Aya. I just want to express my gratitude that we're focusing on the Satipatthana these first, second, and third months. And, you know, I think that the Vedana Satipatthana, which is a very short section, I got really curious when you said it's the seat of everything. And I'm like, why is it so short? So I've been listening to a couple of really good teachers, Joseph Goldstein and Gil Fronsdal, and both of them have been very helpful in kind of explaining why it's so important. It's kind of like the turning point of the first six to the latter six. And it's a pivot point between bodily sensations to mental formations or the mental aspects. And I thought that that really helped me. But what I think was even more important was both of them emphasize this fact of, you know, when it says worldly versus unworldly Vedanas. And there's an emphasis of the unworldly. And Joseph Goldstein even talks about the neutral, unworldly feelings. He uses the word equanimity. So it's important, I think, to understand what is the difference between worldly sensations, which I think these suttas are referring to. You know, we want to let go of them, whereas the unworldly ones, which are the wholesome ones, wholesome Vedanas, we're trying to cultivate. And it's actually okay to enjoy the pleasant, unworldly Vedanas, you know, like the jhanas or practicing gratitude. Those don't come from the five sense context, because Vedana, the way the Pali definition is defined is that, and this was so helpful for me, is like in Pali, it literally means of flesh and not of the flesh. And, you know, as Gil said, that doesn't sound very, you know, poetic. So they, they translate into things like worldly versus unworldly. And so just listening to, these masters who have been practicing for so long was just so helpful in understanding why this is so important, even though it's so short. And I also discovered in tripitaka.org, there's the Pali version, and then there's the English translation. And they spent a whole section at the beginning just on the Vedanas and why it's so important. And, they talk about Sampajanyo, which is, if you're just practicing awareness, it's sati. But the whole satipatthana is really about Sampajanyo. We want to practice awareness, the whole complete noticing of arising, falling away. I'll put the link in for that one. I can't express it very well because, I'm just paraphrasing very poorly what I learned. So anyways, just, I'm just very inspired by what you're teaching and what I'm learning also on my own. I just wanted to share that, but I'll go ahead and put in the Tripitaka link where they spend a whole page and a half even really. And reading the Pali translations was just very helpful to me.
Brilliant. Wow. Thank you, Din Wei. You just brought in so much beautiful Dharma there. Oh my goodness. So what I want you to do, Din Wei, is people, you can access the chat. If you can put in all your, like you mentioned, Gil Fronsdale and other teachers, and also this text. So put it all in. And then other people can also enjoy, as much as time permits, benefiting from these sources. Thank you very much for all of that. You said a lot. No need to go back on it. Wonderful. Anyone else like to come in at this point? And don't forget to look in the chat box, everybody. Okay, let's move on. While Din Wei does that for us, I'll get up the next sutta on the screen for us. Number 2. Here we go. This one's called Sukha Sutta, Happiness Sutta, Pleasure. So just sit back and relax, everybody. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's not very long. And just really take it in. There are these 3 feelings. What 3? Pleasant, painful, and neither pleasant nor painful feeling. Neutral feeling. These are the 3 feelings. Whatever is felt internally and externally, whether pleasure or pain, as well as what's neutral. Having known this as suffering, as dukkha, as deceptive, mosadhamma, as falling apart, one sees them vanish, these feelings vanish as they're experienced again and again. That is how to be free of desire for them. These last 2 lines, the Buddha says, Pusa pusa vayam pasang evam tata virajati iti. He's literally saying, pusa pusa, touching, vayam pasang, arising and passing, just touches one after another, contacts one after another. Evam tata virajati iti. This is how we can be free from desire. This word virajati, the last word of the verse, it means detached. It means turning away from. It means losing interest. We just simply lose interest in this process, in the sense of identification, in the sense of, being connected with it in such a way that we're immersed in it. The ups and downs become, strangely, isn't it, the ups and downs, the drama becomes not that interesting to us anymore. The more we observe feelings arising and passing, the more we quite naturally detach. This is not to dissociate. This is not saying we kind of cease to be conscious or aware or awake to what's felt, but it's more like the relationship shifts. It broadens, actually, doesn't it? It's a more mature relationship. It's a recognition. When we're looking at the change, we're aware of the arising and passing. It's like hands off. This is not something to be part of. This is not something to associate with too closely. No, let's use this to gain wisdom. Let's learn from this. But let's recognize when these bubbles are rising and passing so rapidly, these feelings are coming and going, how foolish to consider any particular one as me or mine. How can I consider any of them as relating to me? Certainly they're not in my control and they're not mine. They don't belong to me. So this verse is really encouraging us to develop this attitude of anicca sanya, of seeing the change. And in this way, very naturally, virajati arises, this detachment, this disinclination to identify, this lack of interest, losing interest. Corinna.
Yes. Before I ask the question, I just want to, something that's helped me with virajati, like the actual Pali, isn't it color, or like without color? And that when I hear the word detachment, that's like, it has something, not the greatest connotation, but not exactly colorless. It's different without color, because I know I'm like, I can be drawn to a certain color or not like a certain color, but like just colors without being drawn or not liking. And the question I have is just to get more clarification. And I want to put a plug in for the guided meditation that Aya Tataloka gave, was it 2 weeks ago for the Maga Puja and on the Satipatthana. And she really talked about the home base and coming back to the home base of the body and knowing. And just to clarify what exactly is meant by feeling, because I guess, is it a sensation, or does there any choice in it? Is there any cognition in it? Or is it like just pure natural biology reaction to sensations or mental concepts? Just to really clarify feeling, unpleasant or pleasant, neutral, to what? How that relates to the home base and that wonderful meditation. Because I love that, because, sorry, to say one more thing, which is what that meditation really did for me is show me how to carry the Satipatthana off the cushion, which is something I've always been questioning, especially the internal, external idea. And so I really appreciated that guided meditation from her. So
thank you so much. Yeah, actually, I really think anyone who didn't hear it, or actually even if we did hear it, let's listen again, because it was an incredible guided meditation from Aya Tataloka. I think it was not last one, but the one before. And yeah, she talked, didn't she, about home base and how we can keep coming back to home base, coming back to the 4 Satipatthanas in our every activity, everyday life. It was really powerful. And so please tune in, everyone, to that. It's all been recorded, so you can access that on the Dhammadharani YouTube, or just YouTube. Moment, something from Seminaries Tavira.
Karina created audio files of just that meditation, which I'm going to post on the website, but I haven't yet.
Fantastic. Okay, listen, everyone. Corinna, thank you because what Corinna's done is you picked out, haven't you, that particular piece of that teaching, because that was a whole evening of practice with IoT. So Corinna's picked out, or picking out, that guided meditation part, and we'll have that separately soon. It's not up at the moment. Otherwise, it's sort of halfway through, isn't it?
Yeah, it starts at 1 hour, 19 minutes.
There you go. That's marvelous. Marvelous. Thank you. So there we are, 1 hour 19. You can tune in as it is, but also we'll be getting it as a separate, we'll call it the home-based meditation, something like that. So you can find it. Thank you for that, Corinna. And now to your query, or your let's investigate together. What does it mean? The actual meaning of pleasant, painful, and neutral feeling. What is it? And I think Linda you were sort of touching on this as well. What is the Buddha actually pointing to? And my sense is that it is literally what we feel. And how do we feel? We feel through the body. The nerve endings, you could talk about it in that way, but it's just whatever tells us we have a body that is sentient, that is responsive, that is producing this experience of feeling. And it's hard with words, isn't it? But it's literally that. It's just that. It's simple. It's just what can be felt. And mostly, as we said, it's not pleasant, not painful. It's sort of neutral. But then there are times when we're very conscious. This is pleasant. This is really enjoyable. This is very nice. This is comfortable. Or this is uncomfortable. This is painful. This is intense. This is not wanted. And the Buddha's just getting us to come to this very fundamental place, I think, Corinna, of just simply being aware of feeling. And then so much of the teaching around Vedana is really pointing to the fact that he's saying, we feel and then we react very quickly. And when we can focus on the feelings, we can start to see that reactivity. We can get a handle on it. I think the reason we find it difficult to define what Vedana means is because these things come together. They're so intertwined. The feeling and the reactions of all different kinds are so intertwined that it's really hard for us to actually separate them out. But as we practice with feelings, we get to almost like slow down the process. We get to notice that these things are separate. First, there's a feeling, say painful feeling, and then there's a response, don't like it, or a thought about it, or, even just an emotion or a slight disinclination towards it is you've already moved away from that basic experience. Does that make sense, Corinna?
Yes. I was hoping you'd say that, because that's that makes it part of the home base so much more easily, and something I could use.
Yeah, it is home base, absolutely. Ground zero, it's the ground of our experience, absolutely. And everything else can really, you can see how so much can fall away very naturally when we base ourselves there. How wonderful it is, to see that. This is the viraga, this is the virujati, the fading away. Yeah.
And to add to that, just the idea of that we're not trying to, we're not allowed to enjoy pleasant feeling, or only have neutral feeling, or it's and none of those. It's just to distinguish between feeling and what comes after.
Yeah. And I'm just reminded, of what also Dinwei was saying, just touching into the the misa, amisa, the fleshy or the spiritual, the worldly or the non-worldly, because that does come in terms of how we relate to, say, pleasant feeling, pleasant sensual feeling. We can relate to it. We can enjoy it, of course, but we can also recognize its transient nature and its inherently unsatisfactory nature. because it doesn't last. We can't enjoy a pleasant taste forever. It's so fleeting. We find ourselves almost, we're arguing. The excitement fades as we really observe what it is to enjoy pleasant sensual feeling. But when we have pleasant unworldly feeling, the pleasure we get from generosity, the pleasure we get from keeping precepts and having a really good feeling about the way we're interacting with the world so skillfully, so harmlessly, or when we experience in our meditation the pleasant feelings that arise when the mind starts to calm down and go quiet and become one-pointed. These feelings, we can say, yeah, there's something here that leads you on. It's actually leading us spiritually forward. These feelings are more like, one can enjoy them more fully because there's a sense of this is part of the spiritual path. This is a good process. And again, we have to be careful not to get caught up in the pleasure, not to get attached to them. But there is that distinction. So the worldly, unworldly distinction, which I'm sure we can learn more about, partly from what Dim Wee's putting in the chat, but also as time goes on with our studies of these suttas. There is a distinction there, isn't there? Ultimately, we want to let go of all the reactivity around feelings. That's the quickest way forward. Even the spiritual pleasant feelings or unpleasant feelings need to be let go of, but there is that distinction there.
If I may just say one more quick thing.
Please, yeah.
Dim Wee, you said something, I think several times ago in it that you heard from Gil Fronsdal, and it's really stuck with me ever since. And this has to do with Marian's question, how do we let go? And I realize even in trying to let go, I feel like I've already messed up or it's not going to work. And what you said, didn't we, was this about the hindrances and how, let's say you have a hindrance, but you're aware of the hindrance, and just being aware of it, it's no longer a hindrance. It's just anger or desire or sloth and torpor or whatever it is. So that's how I really appreciated what you mentioned that day. I've been using that, and I'm kind of using it now with the satipatthana and feeling. It's like, okay, it's not. So I translate things in my head to see, okay, what works for me with my cultural understanding, with my personality. So when I let go just is too hard, or I don't know how. But if I bring awareness to it, or I'm aware of it, it's like that is the letting go, and that really helps me.
Oh, dear. Wonderful. Okay. Ananea.
This is just will be a quick observation or whatever. A little while back, Dinwi mentioned about sati and sampajanya. The sampajanya is clear comprehension. So as one pays attention, as awareness gets more and more clarified and deepened, that understanding gets a fullness to it, which is the clear comprehension comes. And there's it's worth looking that one up and spending some time with the sampajanya part to understand, okay, when this arises and I'm working with this, then there are observations to make during that process that will help the sampajanya gain its fullness. And to the question or the comments about how do you let go, and I know long retreats do help in this. If you are at all able to do that, because the time to build on and to work with it. So definitely that is a help. But regardless, whether you can do that or not, the minute you recognize something, that feeling, if you just know it, it doesn't have power anymore. That's part of being aware. I mean, no matter what kind of a feeling it is, being aware of it in that moment allows you to release it. And it just gets, and now deep emotions, strongly held, long-standing issues definitely will still, they work their way to the surface. But even at that still will chip away by saying, here it comes, and just allowing it, being with it, and allowing it just to dissipate. I guess I'm saying this by way of saying this works. All of the things that are brought up today does work. You just patiently work through them. You work with it as much as you can. And it definitely works. I can't tell you what a difference that has made in my life over the years now, that not feeling like a puppet, that I'm some little, manipulated puppet, that I'm just a victim of my circumstance or whatever, or old things resurfacing, but to really, truly let some stuff go and just not have to revisit it, just not have to have it be rolling around in your memory bank. So anyway, so I just encourage everybody to I'm not done. So obviously this is something I work with all the time, but I just want to say that by way of encouragement, yes, you will notice the difference in your life by pursuing this and staying with it.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Beautifully said, Ananaya. Thank you so much. That's so encouraging, isn't it, everyone? Keep going. Let's keep going. Wonderful. Yeah, Marion.
I wanted to answer back to Ananea. That was so wonderful. Talking about how letting go of the past and like stuff like that. I think a lot of it has to do with like forgiveness, like just forgive and maybe not forget, but like leave it behind, like not go back and have that like what's it called, like not hatred, but like that feeling of like, oh, I gotta get back to them or something, look back at them. And a lot of stuff with like trauma and like past, we all have had like different things in the past, and that really resonated with me. Like just if you're aware of what you're feeling, then you can just be okay with it and let it go. So yeah, I really appreciated that.
Sadhu. Yeah, I think we could all really appreciate that. It's just great to have some encouragement, isn't it? And to hear from each other, the sense of the fruits, the results. It's really good to notice that, and for ourselves also to see. It's like a guiding light for us to see how much we benefited already. I love what you said, Marion. Yeah. Basically, this kind of resentment, or like, what is it, like vengefulness, like wanting to get revenge on people, and that can fester away in the mind, can't it? It's just such torture. It's torture for us. It's not torture for anyone else. So we're really just hurting and harming ourselves. And it's so good to have a handle on how to let that go. This process, because forgiveness, I really think you're right. This is a way of forgiveness, and it's a natural way to forgive. We're not forcing ourselves, which doesn't work, but we're quite naturally making peace with the past. And as you say, Marion, it's not forgetting, is it? In fact, it's more clear remembering in a way, more clearly remembering, more fully experiencing, and then we can let go. How wonderful. What a gift to ourselves especially, but also to anyone that's harmed us or hurt us, because we're not holding it against them. We're not making anything more of it. And that, I'm sure, allows healing all round, and a movement forward in a more positive direction for everyone. Yay. Thank you so much, Mariam, for your words of appreciation. Thank you, Ananaya, so much for your sharing. Wonderful. Okay, my dear friends. Oh, we've got another. Yes, Corinna, come on in.
Is it okay?
Of course. Open forum. Absolutely.
let's see, the other words that struck me from the sutta, and I appreciate how you bring in the Pali a little bit. Was it pusa, the touching, and again, it's that question of feeling neutral and pleasant, and how you know how we normally relate to them, react to them. And the touching really, it's like it gives me a new relationship to it. Like instead of being something I push away or go towards or ignore, it's something that I follow. Touch, something that I sense, like that you do with a sense of touch, arising and falling away. So I really, it's like, again, it's that idea of the wrong idea of, okay, I'm just going to try to make this disappear. I'm going to try to let it go and or just push it away, which, that's not it. But I find that the answer is more like, what new relationship do I have to this that's wholesome or leads me in a wholesome way? And this idea of arising and falling, touching, works.
Yeah. It's really great, isn't it? I love how in the Pali, often to emphasize something, it just repeats, pusa. But also there's that sense, isn't there, of like through time, boom, 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 one after another. And, Din Wei touched on this, didn't you, Din Wei, the chain of dependent origination? It's very interesting. And I think I'll talk about this on Tuesday, probably, where Vedana comes in the chain of dependent arising, because, the Buddha said clearly the cause of feeling is contact. It is this touching. It's something meeting something else. Feeling in the body happens because of contact. And then what is the result of feeling? What does feeling lead on to? It leads on to tanha, onto craving, onto desire. So you're all aware of this, I think, or most of you. So it's like this link in the chain. It's just so crucial. And, this is why, although in Satipatthana Sutta, the Vedana passage is very short, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not important. It just means it's simple. It can be simplified, clarified in those few words, but it's of crucial importance, of course, which is why it's highlighted in Satipatthana Sutta as one of the resorts of mindfulness. But look at that, Corinna. Yes, it's the causes, contact, this touch. And again, if we're really paying attention to feeling, we're noticing that, aren't we? Causes and conditions, painful contact, painful feeling. Pleasant contact, pleasant feeling, neutral contact, neutral feeling. And that's it. That's what's actually happening. And then if we have any defilements in the mind, there'll be the result, which is wanting, not wanting, instead of just allowing it to be what it is. And this is the piece where we can have some agency. We can liberate ourselves from these habits, from the karma, how wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Corinna, for bringing that in. Anyone else like to come in at the mo? Din Wei, yes, please.
If you're going to do the dependent origination on Tuesday, which would be wonderful, I would love to hear that. It would also be wonderful to do the other wheel, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
which is like the opposite of dependent, like all this suffering, and then there's the other one where it's, and I think because so many teachers focus on that, suffer, and I didn't realize it's like, well, there's also another way of it to work. Yes, there's contact, feeling, tone, perception, reaction, but when you break that chain, the other wheel, I forget there's a name, I'm sure, the other wheel comes into play. And I think that's very inspiring to help people know that, as opposed to always focusing on suffering, it's hard. Anyways.
Yeah, didn't we? I'll definitely do that. Thank you for that prompt. And you're right. I mean, it is important. It's anuloma and patilloma. Patilloma is the reverse process. And of course, this is what we really want to bring in, because this is what's happening for us. This is what we're doing. We're reversing this whole process. How amazing. So we're literally coming out of, stepping away from the karmic predicament that we find ourselves in. Or you could put it another way, you can say we're deconditioning, you know, how wonderful. So yeah, well, let's explore this, because Vedana is right in the center of this whole process. How interesting that this is the place really where we can do the reverse.
Yeah, I think that's why I really appreciated both Joseph and Gil talking about making an emphasis to point out unworldly versus worldly, or of the flesh and not of the flesh. Because I think I had just sort of like, okay, it's feeling and it's one umbrella, and it's not like that really.
Yeah,
So,
it's true.
yeah.
I mean, that's so true. I mean, I think we can definitely start with just that. Just observe what you feel. You know, that's in, you know, in the Buddha's teaching on Satipatthana Sutta on Vedana. He says, you know, bare awareness is enough. That's all you need. And we can simply be aware of what's happening. And I think in many ways that's, you know, just so valuable. It really is. But we can also observe over time, you know, that there are these different, there's the kind of moral or ethical quality to feeling as well. It's a whole other dimension. We can notice, yeah, wholesome feelings and less wholesome feelings, or sensual feelings, worldly feelings, feelings that tether us to the world if we follow them, and those that actually lift us up if we allow them some space. So I think these distinctions are really interesting, and of course they're right there too in Satipatthana Sutta. Mm-hmm. So it's whatever works for you, you know. And over time, I think we can appreciate more the worldly and unworldly aspects.
I think it's important to remember this is a gradual to get there fast, and that's and like, if you're not that far along the path, maybe all you can sense is the worldly sensations, right? And then at some point, when your mindfulness and your practice becomes, you know, far enough along, the other fruits start to show themselves. And I definitely have had the pleasure of experiencing that. But in the beginning, this is a very gradual path. And so that's where I think things like the paramis, patience, generosity, you know, we can do those now.
Yeah, thank you, Dinwei. I mean, I think the worldly and unworldly distinctions right from the start and throughout the path, you know, and the Buddha did encourage us. So let's bring this in, because he did encourage us to notice, you know, when we do something that's kind, when we do something generous, when we do something meritorious, we can actually really very fruitfully observe, well, how does that feel? And notice the feelings that arise of happiness, of joy, of well-being. So right from the very beginning, all the way through the path, these opportunities to experience unworldly pleasant feeling, unworldly painful feeling, perhaps, you know, the sense of seeing where we're at and wishing we were somewhere more peaceful and so forth. And so it's really like, it's not that we can't appreciate worldly and unworldly feelings anywhere we're at. That can be a really fruitful practice for us, and we can simplify as well, just sort of depending on what works for you. My sense is, when we're actually meditating, just to let it be really simple, just feel, nothing more. But in our everyday life, we can reflect, can't we, on our experience and really bring in more of the teachings to develop wisdom around these different kinds of feelings.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Mm-hmm. Sadhu. Thank you so much, Dinwei. Maitri, hello.
Sadhu, sadhu. I had a question related to actually something that stemmed up during the morning meditation. As we are working with the Vedananupassana, the sixth sense basis, with mind being the sixth. So often, as this is for me also, me personally, as I'm looking at the feelings of the body, sometimes thoughts arise, and then you look at, then I start looking at the thoughts and whether they are accompanied by sorrowful or pleasant or happy feelings. Is the within Vedananupassana, the feeling tone related to mental objects, is that part of it, or does that just flow into Chittanupassana? I was looking through the Satipatthana Sutta a little bit to try to, wasn't too clear to me. So
Yeah. Thank you for bringing this in, Maitri, because it is like quite hard sometimes to know, like if we really want to try and categorize, what is this experience? Is this Chittanupassana? Am I observing the state of mind or the feelings, or am I in the realm of Dhammanupassana, concepts? It can be quite hard sometimes to know, but it's wonderful to investigate and to see, to figure, how does this fit? My sense is that we can notice how Vedananupassana is very simple, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings to be felt. But then we can see how they relate to, and there's almost like often the spin-off, isn't there, from an unpleasant feeling. We're very, very quick often to associate it with some kind of mood, emotion, or thought, or pattern of thinking, or memory of aspects from the past, and so on. And these things can come together like a great big clump of experience. And my sense is that, we don't necessarily, it's interesting to try and figure and categorize, but we don't need to necessarily, more like just to stay with the feeling, just to keep coming back to the feeling, and to be willing to sort of just allow everything else to come, to sort of flow by, as you said, Maitri, to just be present, to be arising and passing, but we're not really giving it so much attention. So the thoughts around the painful feeling, or the emotion, the sorrow, the anxiety, the anger, whatever it might be, we can be aware, oh yeah, this is an aspect of what's happening here. It's connecting with this feeling. Can I just keep mindful of the feeling and see how it's changing? My sense is this, in this way, when we, funnily enough, if we turn our attention to some extent away from that complex, shall we call it, and just focus on feeling, then the complex itself tends to quite naturally open up and disentangle. And then we start to see, there are all these separate components that kind of have made up this experience. Does that make sense, Maitri? What do you think?
I was also thinking, the question was more also, let's say I have a painful feeling in my knee and I'm looking at it, but then some random thought comes up. So now this is not related to the bodily feeling. I was thinking this is thought that has come up, and this thought is now it's there in my mind, and the thought could be a sorrowful thought or a pleasant, happy thought, or I was really asking about the feelings that are associated with the thought as opposed to a bodily. I don't know whether I'm.
Yeah, sorry, Maitri. Yeah, I didn't get what you were saying before, but I think I've got it now. That you'll be having a certain feeling, and then something completely different happens. A thought of something completely unrelated comes up, and then you'll be aware of some feeling that comes in, following on from that thought.
Just related to a thought then, and not related to any of the other five senses. Maybe there's a memory associated with it that had something to do with the senses, but it's really a thought, and it's now, yeah.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, look, we can just observe these things as they happen. It's quite interesting. I mean, there can be patterns and there can be a kind of random mess of of all different kinds of experience, can't there? And we can start to notice, Maitri, when we're paying attention to feeling, we can start to notice that, yeah, there's also sights, sounds, smells, tastes, thoughts that are happening. And can we then come back to feeling, be with feeling, and see how these things interact, you know? It's like I see something and a pleasant or unpleasant or neutral feeling can arise. I have a memory of something just pop in, seemingly quite randomly, you know, or maybe it isn't random. Maybe there is some kind of association between the feeling that was there in the knee of pain and then this thought coming in. Who knows? We don't really need to know. What we want to do is be aware of what's happening now. And just to notice, actually, with pretty much, I would say, with every thought, with every sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch, there will be feelings, you know, to observe at the same time or following on. Perhaps we could say following on very closely. And if we stay with feeling, we can get to recognize that there are many, many patterns playing out and just watch them arising, falling, and changing, you know. Yeah, it is like that, though, isn't it, Maitri? To be willing to go with the flow, perhaps, you know, if the mind just pops up with some sort of thought, not to make a problem about that, just to be, okay, this is what's happening now. Back to feeling what's happening now. Oh, something completely different. Just to be with that flow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maitri. Okay, anybody else have any comments, reflections, questions? I'm tempted to go for another sutta. What do you think? I know time's short, but yeah, Corinna.
I have a lot of thoughts today.
Okay, no problem. This is good. Let's hear from you.
I was just thinking how, like, if I were to tap myself here again and again and again for like 5 minutes, as soon as I stopped, I would still feel like something's tapping me here. And similarly, like with the mind, I was studying Korean earlier when I couldn't sleep, and then I tried to fall asleep, and then just like grammar terms kept bubbling up, and I'm like, no, I'm trying to sleep, but it's what I had just done with my mind. So some of it is just biology. Like it's what environment you put yourself in, and it just kind of bubbles up. And I was thinking about how you could really use the reverse path to your advantage, especially when it comes to things like avoiding spiritual bypass, or the idea of like you think you're past something when you're actually not. So for example, for example, I'd want to forgive someone. Let's say I'm like, I've heard it's really good to forgive this person. So I forgive them. But if I really like feel that thought in the body, which I love the intelligence of the body, like it doesn't, maybe, and if I hadn't really forgiven them, or something else needs to happen before the forgiveness can happen, it'll show up in my body and it won't feel right. So it's interesting to sometimes I don't know what I think really. I have to it's like I can't really trust my mind necessarily. I have to go back to the body and then feel it out. I'm like, oh, okay, there's something still to process or to figure out. So I love that backwards path too.
Yeah, that's really beautifully explained. You know, just this lovely example that you're giving us of how that is. That, you know, yeah, we can try and override the way things are, you know, the state of mind, perhaps we may have some trauma, in the body, for instance. And we can, willfully choose to just ignore it, no, I'm fine. It's all finished. It's all in the past. We can do that kind of thing. And we do that kind of thing, don't we? Either consciously or sometimes very unconsciously. And yet, as you say, Corinna, oftentimes when we start to practice meditation, we can begin to very humbly open to all the suppressed material, that we've neglected to or chosen not to face. And the body remembers. It's all there. It's like a library, isn't it? Or a repository of all the experience. And it may well be that it's, not just the experience of this lifetime. It may go deeper, further, when we consider where these bodies come from. There's nothing but this incredible recycling going on, isn't there, over millennia? So all of this materiality that we're currently having this relationship with, of being embodied within and experiencing, there's an awful lot there. The Buddha said the entire universe is to be found right here in this mind and body. And so we can willfully, think that we know what's what and that we can control these processes, but of course we can't, because there's no we to really control anything at all. There is simply cause and effect playing out, And so the wise approach is just what we're doing, isn't it? Is to be willing to open to that and to let it be a source of wisdom and understanding, to develop in Dharma, to see the Dharma. That is to see the Dharma, isn't it? The Dharma's right here, the truth, nature, So thank you very much for that beautiful example, because this is something we can really appreciate. Let's not think we're in control. Let's not try to make ourselves this way or that, but just open to the way it is. The mystery of it, really. And the more we open, isn't it, Corinna? The more we open to the way things are, the more we can see the sort of the vastness of it and the inseparable nature of all things. We're part of a whole. We can let go of this little bubble, the sense of a little bubble, and at the same time we can open up to the history here and the experience here in a more full way, and let it all come to rest. As the Buddha said, let the feelings come to cessation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just appreciation for that. The beauty of the Satipatthana, it sounds so simple. Body, feeling, tone. Oh yeah. There's such a resource and such a possibility for healing and guidance.
Yeah. Truly it is, Corinna. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I really feel this is a good place for us to conclude today, because that really says it all. These teachings are incredible. And this Satipatthana Sutta, what people talk about the source of it, and it may be a bit of this and a bit of that. And is it exactly what the Buddha said? I think we can be very confident that these are the teachings of the Buddha, and they've been put together in this way. However, they've been put together in this way, we can be so grateful to have this resource, and just keep investigating the teachings and applying the teachings to our practice, and we really can't go wrong. I do think, that all the guidance is there, and we can really just keep on immersing ourselves now in this beautiful sutta. Great choice. We can all thank Venerable Satima for requesting that we focus on the Satipatthana Sutta for this winter retreat. But it's a life practice for us, isn't it? Let's keep coming back to this sutta again and again for our meditation guidance. And I really appreciate these discussions, because this is a way for me of deepening the understanding, the collective wisdom, how valuable, How supportive. Thanks, everybody, so much.
Thank you
We
for guiding
can,
us.
let's conclude by paying homage to our teacher, to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha together. And before we part, I'll just mention very briefly that tomorrow night, please come on over, 7 o'clock on Zoom. Ayatollah Loka is offering teachings on Vedana. And tomorrow morning, anyone who wants to take the 8 precepts, you have the opportunity to do so, 8:30. Okay, please find your Buddha, external manifestation or internal, or preferably both. And we'll pay homage. Arahant Sama Sambuddha Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantan Abhiwademi. Sawakator Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sangang Namami.
Thank you so much, Anya.
Thank you, Aya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Aya.